Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I wanted to chat with you about the books that I read in June. It was interesting because I felt like I didn't finish that many books, and then I looked at my wrap-up on Storygraph, and I actually finished 12 books, but a lot of them are really short. I have some manga in here, I have a graphic novel, I have a bunch of middle grade, and so I have a lot of very short books that I finished during this month. But I'm still in the middle of some like big hefty books. And so it made me feel like maybe I wasn't making as much progress as I thought until I sat down and started looking at the things that I did finish. I'll have this video split up into genres in the timestamps. So if there are certain genres that you're interested in and others that you're not, feel free to skip around. So I'm going to start out with graphic novels and manga. So I continued in Attack on Titan. I have volume 29 here, but I read volume 28 also. I think I already returned that to the library. This continues to be just such a fascinating series for me. There's a lot of questioning that's happening right now in terms of people's ulterior motivations, and things are being revealed about the plans that people have and why they're behaving the way that they are. But there's a huge part of me that doesn't even trust a lot of the things that are being said. Like, is this really their plan? Is this really their motivation? I don't know. But we're getting closer to the end of this series. Christy and I, we've been reading it for a really long time. Most of the time we read one volume a month. This time it ended up being 2. I think there's 36 volumes in the series. So the fact that we're through volume 29, we're really edging closer to the end of the series to find out what people are really thinking and how all this is going to shake out. I have some predictions of where I think people are going to be at the end of this, but I have been surprised many times before. I also read When Stars Are Scattered. This is a graphic novel memoir. So it is actually geared toward middle graders despite it being a really heavy story. So this is Omar Muhammad's story. Victoria Jameson has then illustrated his story and put it into the graphic novel format. He was a Somali refugee who fled Somalia when he was just, I want to say like 4 or 5 years old with his younger brother. And so at the time that we pick this up, I think that Omar is like in the 10 to 12 range, but I don't know exactly how old he is. I can't remember because we continue to follow him through to like young adulthood. And so it follows his life at a refugee camp, the beginnings of his education, and just, I don't know, it's just like, it is such an incredible story with a lot of hardship and a lot of sorrow. I thought it was so beautifully done, so well done for the age range that it's intended for. I do think some of the things will be a bit intense or maybe harder to follow for kids on the younger end of middle grade, but I definitely think upper end of middle grade, middle school, high school, adulthood. I just think that this is such a well done book and really shines a light on what it's like to be displaced, but also what it's like in refugee camps in general and how it feels to like hope that one day you'll be able to go home, but to feel like you're stuck in this place where you don't belong, but you do belong because no one else belongs here either. It's just like, there's a lot of complicated emotions and things that are processed in this book, but it is so beautifully done, and I'm so happy that I finally read it. Moving on to middle grade, I finished the Gregor the Overlander series. I think it's called something else. I think it's called like the Underland Chronicles or something. There's 5 books in this series. I had read Gregor the Overlander a few years ago during middle grade March and really enjoyed it, and then didn't pick up the rest of the books for whatever reason. And so this year during middle grade March, I was determined to restart the series. So I listened to Gregor the Overlander. And then, you know, up to this point, I'd gone through book 3. So book 4 is The Marks of Secret, and book 5 is The Code of Claw. And this series is so like intense and heavy for a middle grade series in a lot of ways. Like, it tackles so many different things. Like, the first book is definitely more whimsical, but as the series progresses, you have things tackled like a plague and kind of like this, I don't want to say racism because it's between like humans that are living under the ground and then like rats and mice and cockroaches and spiders and bats and like all these different creatures that are living under the earth that the people like us who are living above the earth have no idea of the civilization below them. But there's these constant wars that are happening between these groups. And so the way that the groups view each other is very interesting. You kind of have like a whole genocide plot line going on, in particular in this one. And then yeah, it's just I thought it was really well done, considering that it's a middle grade series. It tackles some really tough topics and talking about how we view others and whether or not war is ever the answer. And so there's some very interesting topics that are tackled here, as well as having a really imaginative world with really likable main characters that you root for. I've heard some people be very disappointed by the final book because they felt like it didn't have like the full closure that they needed. And I understand that, given that it is a middle grade series. But as an adult reading a middle grade series, I thought that the ending was really well done. It left it kind of open and reflective rather than having kind of a finality to the ending. So I wouldn't say that you shouldn't read the series if you need finality either, though, because I don't feel like it's like super loose. Like questions are answered and things like that, but it didn't end the way I anticipated and the way that middle grades so often do. But I felt the same way after reading The Hunger Games. The way that that ended, I felt like was in a reflective way as well. And so maybe that's just Suzanne Collins' style. I read 2 fantasies this month, one of which I read the majority in the month of May, which is Agnes Aubert's Mystical Cat Shelter. And I keep talking about this book because I love it. I have mentioned in multiple videos, I think like my mid-year freak out video and something else. I think this book has come up multiple times. So this is by the same author who wrote the Emily Wilde series, and so it has that same kind of cozy, whimsical feel. I think that the Emily Wilde books have like a little bit more of an edge of darkness than this particular book does. But this is not related to Emily Wilde in any way. But we do have a main character, Agnes, who is living in an alternate Montreal in like the early 1900s. And there's a problem with feral cats in the city. And so she really wants to do everything she can to domesticate these cats, to find homes for them. And so she lives in this world where there are these magicians who sometimes get out of hand. And as a result, they have blown the wall off of the place that she's currently renting for her cat shelter. So she's looking for a new place. And she ends up inadvertently renting from a dark wizard. Lots of chaos ensues. There's lots of witty banter. There's lots of fun stuff. There's lots of cats. The magic is fun. I just like really enjoyed this. It felt very reminiscent of Howl's Moving Castle to me. It had a very similar feel. Like the dynamic between Agnes and the Dark Lord in this story is very similar to me of the dynamic of Sophie and Howl in Howl's Moving Castle. And so I really loved this book. I also read Dragon Keeper by Robin Hobb. This is the first book in the Rainwild Chronicles, which is the 4th series in the overarching series of the Realm of the Elderlings. So this is actually a quartet instead of a trilogy. And in this quartet, we are back in kind of like the Bingtown, Rainwilds area with some dragons, as you can tell by the title. I'm not going to say really too much else about the plot other than that, because I don't want to spoil previous series, because this definitely interconnects with them and we do see some characters from previous series. The hard thing about reading this book so soon on the tail of Tawny Man is that we are once again starting over with brand new characters that I have to learn and get to know. And that wasn't the case with Tawny Man, because we're picking up with the same characters that we have known and loved in the Farseer trilogy. And so this felt like a stark contrast to that, in that we have all new people that we don't know. I had been warned that this quartet is like pretty much never anyone's favorite of this series, mostly because it's kind of angsty. There's kind of some like YA kind of feeling things happening. And I think part of that is because a lot of the protagonists that we follow, many of the viewpoints are on the younger end. And so at least that's what I was thinking, why. But then when I reflected, I never felt like the Farseer trilogy felt YA, even when Fitz was that age. And I never felt like certain characters felt like a YA novel in the Life Ship Trader series, because you know we have like Malta is very young, her brother's pretty young, both of her brothers are pretty young, and so we do have some young people that we follow in that, but that their perspectives never felt YA either. So I feel like it's intentional on Robin Hobb's part to write characters of this age range who feel immature. I definitely feel like that is intentional because not all the characters have felt that same kind of YA angsty immature feel that I'm getting from the characters in this book. I am finding the exploration of the world and the lore to be interesting, but there's not a lot of characters that I feel like rooting for yet. But I guess the same thing was true with Live Ship Traders, but this one I'm just definitely not enjoying as much. Some of the aspects of some of the relationships feel really, really icky, and that's intentional on Hobbs' part. They are not supposed to be romanticized or wonderful, and she's doing a really good job of making me feel that. So it definitely made me feel uncomfy in places, and I'm prepared for that to just continue into the next book. But it's definitely, I feel like, the weakest start of all the Hobb books I've read so far of every series. It didn't grip me in the same way her other books have, and it's just fallen short in a lot of ways, but I was anticipating that going in, and yet it still disappointed me. I read 2 classics during the month of June. One was for my in-person book club, and that was Hind's Feet on High Places. This was a reread for me. I had read it when I was a child and then tried to read it about 3 years ago, I think, with a read-along that was happening on YouTube, and then I DNF'd it because I wasn't enjoying it. So I listened to it on audio this time, which helped. But this is essentially almost like a parable. It's like an allegory, really, of this young girl named Much Afraid who wants to travel to the heights with the shepherd above the trials and the fears that she's facing. And so it's her journey, and it's very Christian allegory. There is nothing that's even remotely subtle about it. It's very simplistic, and it feels like it could be written for children, which is maybe why I enjoyed it so much as a child. I know lots of adults really love this too, but I'm finding as an adult, at least in the stage of life where I currently am, that simplistic allegories just don't do it for me. I want more depth. I want more nuance. There was a lot of beauty in this book, and I can appreciate what it was doing. There were some things that were really poignant, some things that were really well done, and they were really beautiful. But I just think that allegories just don't click as well for me. I feel the same way about Pilgrim's Progress. I need something with at least the level of nuance of, the Chronicles of Narnia. And to say that the Chronicles of Narnia feel nuanced in comparison to this book tell you, how blatant it is, because I feel like Chronicles of Narnia are very obvious in what it's doing all the time. So I don't know. I like things that I can chew on more, and I feel like when something's just handed to me and it's very blatant and there's no nuance, there's nothing for me to really chew on. And so I feel like in terms of the ideas and the things that were expressed in this book, they were really, really beautiful, but I would have rather read a nonfiction about it than a fiction. I also read Cain by Jean Toomer. This is an author who's a Harlem Renaissance author that I knew nothing about going into this book. And I read this with Thea, and my oh my, did I absolutely love this book. I was not expecting that. It just kind of came out of left field. So essentially the format of this book is also really interesting in that we will have a short story, and then we'll have 2 poems, and then another short story and 2 poems. And I felt like his poetry is where he really, really shines for me. I loved his poetry so much. Some of the short stories were massive hits for me. Some were a little bit of a swing and a miss. But I think part of that is that I had to kind of work to figure out what he was saying in some of them. He's not obvious in what he's saying. His imagery is beautiful. His themes are really interesting, particularly about Black identity. That's kind of the theme as we're going through here, because Toomer was definitely white passing. And so there is some exploration of what that means in these stories, but that's not all that we do. So we kind of start, the first section is in the South and what Black life looks like in the South in a post-Reconstruction era time. Then we kind of follow to the North, and we kind of have the contrast of the Black people who have been in the North for a really long time, and then those who have come up for the Great Migration, which was occurring when Toomer was writing this. And then the final section is one longer short story. Most of the short stories are just like a couple of pages, but the final one is more like 30 pages. And it's about a man who his family's from the South. They went to the North. He was born in the North, and now he's come back to the South. And so overall, there's like this circle that happens in talking about Black people in different places in the United States, their experiences, the way that they're treated, the way that they treat each other, the way that they see themselves. And so there was so much of this that was just so well done. There were elements of it that reminded me of Flannery O'Connor, but then there was also kind of almost some strange stream of consciousness type things that were happening here too, that I didn't always enjoy, but it was very, very thought-provoking. I could maybe classify this next book as a classic because the edition that I have is the 40th anniversary edition, but this book is almost 50 years old at this point. But I'm classifying it as literary fiction because I'm like, it does like 46 years. Does that count as a classic? I'm not really sure, but Housekeeping by Marilynne Robinson. This is my first of her books, and it's actually the first of her books also. This is her debut novel, which was nominated for a Pulitzer. I'm always impressed when people's debut novels are like Pulitzer finalists and are nominated and stuff. I always think that's amazing. So this is a story of two young girls who have been kind of displaced. Their mother has passed away. They're raised by their grandmother, and then their great aunts for a short time period, and then their aunt, their mother's sister, who is very different from how they've been raised previously. And so this is just, there's not much of a plot to this book. We just kind of follow these girls through loss and grief and coming to terms with the world, as well as kind of what it means to really have a home in comparison to like this feeling of transience and going from place to place, because that's what their aunt who has raised them has done. She's never really stayed in one place. She just kind of blows through like a tumbleweed. So there's some really interesting conversations that are happening here. I thought that this was so beautifully written. At times it felt a little overwritten, if you can say that. At times I felt like I didn't even know what she was trying to say because she just went so far into this almost like dreamlike state and dreamlike prose. But I feel like overall the prose in this book is very like dreamy and melancholy with like a really sad tone. But it was really beautiful, and I really want to read more of Marilynne Robinson's books in the future. When I was looking back, I was shocked to find I had only read one nonfiction because it felt like more, and then I realized I am reading more. I just haven't finished them. I've only finished one. So on audio, I listened to The Terrible Speed of Mercy. This is, well, the subtitle says it's a spiritual biography of Flannery O'Connor. I found out about this book through Lauren Jean talking about it on her channel. And I'm really glad that I just happened to watch that video and hear about this because I really, really enjoyed this. So this is obviously a biography of Flannery O'Connor. I have read most of Flannery O'Connor's works, not all. I've read Wise Blood. I've read the entire collection of Everything That Rises Must Converge. The entire collection of A Good Man Is Hard to Find. A few of her other short stories. I have some I still haven't read. I haven't read most of her nonfiction, but I have dipped in and out of The Habit of Being, which is a collection of her letters. And then I still have to read The Violent Bear It Away, which is her final novel that she completed. So I have read a decent chunk of Flannery, but there was so much I didn't know about her. I knew that she was from Georgia. I knew that she wrote Southern Gothic novels. I knew that she was Catholic, and I knew that she died of lupus at a very young age. And that is literally all I knew about her. So it was really fun to read about what Flannery was like as a child, what her upbringing was like, how her faith played such a huge role in her life and in her works, because her works are very, very dark. She really makes the reader face the depth of human depravity and hypocrisy and racism and things like that. And then you're looking at these characters that are like that, and then she turns a mirror and it's kind of like, and what about you? You know, so they're very reflective, but also very jarring at times. I think that Flannery loved kind of like a shock value element to her stories, but this was really wonderful. I really, really loved learning more about her. I wish I had read it physically because I felt like the audiobook was not of the best quality, even though I did get through it okay. But have you ever listened to an audiobook where the author's, or not the author, the narrator's voice suddenly like changes and it sounds like they inserted something or they recorded them at different times and so it sounds a little bit off? That was happening really frequently in this book, and sometimes it'd be one word. There was one point where every time someone's name was mentioned, it did it. So it's like they realized maybe they were saying the name wrong or something and had to go back and fix it and replace it in there. But it was weird. And then there'd be times where it was like a few sentences. Like, it doesn't bother me if it's, you know, at a natural breaking point, like a paragraph point or a new chapter or whatever. But it's really odd when it's like in the middle of a sentence and it's just one word. It ends up feeling really jarring. However, that's no reflection on the book as a whole. I thought that it was fantastic. Lastly, I read a mystery this month. Who am I? I almost never read mysteries, honestly. I used to quite frequently. And then I just kind of got out of that. So I was reading a book this month that was kind of like a mystery slash thriller, and I ended up DNFing it about halfway through. And I was like, I kind of want to pick up something that doesn't have the same vibe, but is still kind of mysterious. So I picked up Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone. This is such a fun book. I had a blast reading this book. So this is a murder mystery, as you might be able to tell from the title. Our narrator is a man named Ernest Cunningham, and he is a writer that writes advice to mystery writers. And so he is narrating this, talking about his family, and he's very like witty, very sarcastic, breaks the fourth wall a lot, and will say things such as, the phone rang and we jumped, because of course we did. This is a mystery novel. And if you look at the number of this chapter, you'll realize that someone is about to die. And so it was just, oh my gosh, it was so much fun. I had an absolute blast reading this book. It almost felt like a Lemony Snicket book for adults. And I don't necessarily mean a series of unfortunate events, although there's a lot of breaking the fourth wall there too. But there is another series, I can't remember what it's called. I think the first book is Who Could That Be at This Hour? And then there's one called like Shouldn't You Be in School? And so like all of the titles are questions, and it's supposed to be Lemony Snicket as a young boy investigating these things. And so this felt like that before adults. Anyways, those are the books that I read in the month of June. I had some books that I really loved, some that were a little disappointing. I don't know if I really had very many like new favorites, honestly. I had a lot of 4 stars this month, which is fine. 4 stars are still really good. Books that I would reread and recommend. So there's a lot in here that were really good, definitely more good than bad. I would love to hear from you in the comments down below if you've read any of these books. Of course, I would love to discuss those, but I'd love to hear what you've been reading lately. What is your favorite book that you read in the month of June? Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.